My sister and I grew up under a wide sky, where the wind carried drums and the earth held stories. People whispered that my hands could ease pain, yet my sister smiled and took the praise. When the queen heard of miracles she sent for us, promising one test, one patient, and the truth. I feared losing more than my name, our bond. Would wisdom speak louder than pride? I stepped forward, heart steady, palms warm with memory and quiet courage. If this story moves you, please like, subscribe, and share, so more hearts find healing and gentle, lasting wisdom today. When I think of the day everything began to change, I see the morning light sliding down the side of our clay house as if the sun had placed a warm hand on our wall. The air carried a hint of smoke from cooking fires and the sweet, sharp scent of crushed leaves, because I had already pounded herbs in the mortar. A breeze touched the water in the calabash by the door, and little circles shimmered across its surface. In that soft hour, my mind could rest in the small steps of care. Wash, grind, listen, pray that my hands would do no harm. My name is Amma. I was not born with a title or a drum roll. I was born with hands that learned. My grandmother, Sifa, used to take my fingers in hers and press them to her own wrist until I could feel her pulse like a bird's wing beating. "Let your hands listen," she would say, her voice low and even, "and the body will tell you what it needs." She never claimed magic. She showed me how to notice. The color of the tongue, the sound of a cough, dry or wet, the way a person sits when pain is near, the heat of a fever beneath the cool of the skin. We watched the world in the same way, how rain clouds build long before the first drop, how the termites leave wings on the ground when the season changes, how a mother looks at a child who will not sleep. My sister Layla watched too, though in a different way. She watched faces. She counted the smiles and measured their length. She liked to stand where the light could find her. She wore wraps of strong colors and tied her headscarf so it turned her face to a small crown. She moved like a song one had heard before and wanted to hear again. When Layla laughed, people turned to her. When I laughed, people relaxed. We loved each other in the manner of two streams that run side by side, close and clear, touching stones but rarely touching each other. We worked in the same courtyard, under the same tree, with the same old wooden bench and the same baskets of drying leaves. Layla knew every plant by name. She could tell the different greens at a glance. She was not careless. She just liked to hold praise like a bright bead in her hand. That morning, Grandmother Sifa's stool still leaned against the wall where she had left it. She had died in the last rainy season, a quiet death after a full harvest of years. The ache of missing her came and went, like the slow pain of an old scar that pulls when rain is near. When I cleaned her stool, I wiped the two curved marks where her heels had rubbed the wood smooth. One day I would rub those marks away with my hands alone, and I could not bear that thought. So I touched them only with my eyes. Our village sat between a river that sounded, in the night, like many small voices speaking, and a hill where a baobab tree stood like an old, kind giant who listened more than he spoke. In the dry season, the Harmattan wind laid a fine veil of dust over everything. It made the mornings sharp and the evenings tender. In the rainy season, the world turned green and generous, and the paths underfoot felt like soft bread. This was the world that taught me to heal, the steady tasks, the predictable changes, the signs. It taught me, too, the limits that make wisdom humble. We do not stop the sun with a leaf. That day, a woman named Abina came to our courtyard with her little boy asleep on her back. Her ankle was swollen from a twist in the field. The skin over the swelling looked tight and shiny. She lowered herself onto the bench and tried to hide a wince, but there it was, plain as a bird in a bare tree. I knelt. My palms were warm from working the pestle, and when I placed them around her ankle, it felt like holding a warm gourd that had been in the sun. I closed my eyes and breathed slow. My thumb found a patch that was not as hot as the rest. Good. Heat spoke of irritation. Cool spoke of normal. Beneath my thumb, her pulse was regular. I asked her to point to the first step that hurt. She did. I pressed there and watched her eyes. Not her mouth, not her hands, her eyes. The eyes tell what the pride will not. Tell me how you fell, I said. I stepped on a root, she answered. I heard a small snap. I nodded and reached for a cloth soaked in cool water. I wrapped the ankle with a gentle, even pressure. We sat like that for a while, listening to the small boy's breathing. A hen scratched near the doorway. In the next courtyard, someone sang softly to a child. I mixed ground leaves with shea butter and a little salt. I rubbed it in above the swelling, not on it, so that blood would flow and carry comfort. I showed her how to rest without being still, how to point and flex her toes to keep the rivers moving inside. By then, I heard Layla returning from the market. Her bracelets clicked, her earrings chimed. She came through the doorway with her arms full of limes and ginger, and her smile filled the courtyard like the first orange of sunset when the day has been long and kind. She set her basket down and touched Abena's shoulder. Oh, we will have you dancing by festival, Layla said, kneeling with that smooth grace she carried from childhood, the grace that made people watch her and sigh. The ankle will obey me, Abena laughed, relieved at the warmth in Layla's voice. Then command it, Layla, she said, half joking and half hoping. Layla unwrapped my cloth and applied another one she dipped in a mix of cool and warm water, a trick that sometimes helps the vessels answer. It was not wrong. It was only faster. She hummed a tune as she worked, and she told a story of a woman in a far village who leaped over a ditch and found her ankle steady. The story moved like a kite in a steady wind. By the time Layla tied the last knot, the courtyard had gained 3 new listeners who had wandered in to see what the song was about. When Abena stood to test her foot, she put more weight on it and did not make a face. She blinked, surprised, as if a small curtain had been lifted. It feels better, she said, pleased. Layla clapped once, laughing. You see, she declared, turning to the listeners, my hands are stubborn with pain. It has to listen. One of the listeners, a man named Kojo, nodded with approval. We hear you have a gift, Layla, he said. Blessings on your skill. Layla bowed her head and took the blessing with a gentle smile. I felt the smallest shift in the air. Not anger, not even envy, but a kind of coolness where there should have been warmth. It was as if a shadow had moved across our bench, though the sun had not changed. Later, when we washed the cloths together, the water was a little green from the leaves. Our hands moved in the same rhythm. I said nothing. Layla looked at me through the steam of a cooking pot and shrugged as if to say, why trouble ourselves with small words? The ankle is better. Is that not what matters? I wanted to ask, whose hands did the work? I wanted to say, the story you told flew faster than the truth. But I remembered Grandmother Sifa's voice. When you push the water hard, it spatters on you first. So I smiled, folded the washed cloths, and put them on the line. The wind caught a corner of one and lifted it. For a breath, it looked like a small white bird, ready. That evening, as the sun went down behind the baobab, a group gathered under its branches to tell stories. On festival nights and on simple, ordinary nights alike, we shared tales to remind us who we were. Someone brought a drum. Someone else brought a rattle made of gourd and seeds. Layla stepped forward when the time opened for a song, and the circle gave way as if it had been waiting for her. She sang of healing, of hands that calmed storms in the chest and lightened the heaviness in weary knees. She sang in the third person so it sounded like a legend. But when she raised her palms on the last long note, the circle cheered her, and the praise fell on her like soft beads. I saw her drink it in. It did not make her unkind. It made her shine. As the months turned, the praise followed. Some people came to our courtyard asking for the sister with the song. Some came asking for me by name. Layla's kindness drew them, her bright presence, her careful way of saying what they needed to hear. And she learned my methods well. She had worked beside me and Grandmother Sifa for years. She knew what to boil, what to pound, what to avoid. Sometimes, even often, she did good work that led to peace. I do not shade that truth. But times came when she believed that the performance was also the cure. She pressed too hard, thinking firmness alone would move a stubborn knot. She stirred honey into a drink that should have been plain water. She added a dramatic flourish to a simple act of washing and drying. When that worked, it worked. When it did not, it left a glitter in the air and a hollowness on the bench, like a drum struck too hard and left to ring. I kept to my lane, as Grandmother Sifa had taught me. I measured breaths. I asked quiet questions. I kept records in my head and in a small book tied closed with twine. Patterns appear, Grandmother said. If you do not write them down, they can still speak. They just whisper. I listened for the whisper. One afternoon, a girl came with a soft cough that did not sound dangerous, just sad. She had a rash behind her ears and along her neck where the heat trapped sweat. Layla was the first to greet her, and she reached for oil. The girl smiled, trusting the kindness of the greeting. I caught Layla's eye and shook my head a little. I asked for a bowl of cool water and a clean cloth. We pressed the cloth to the skin and let it breathe. We made a tea from mild leaves and salt. For 3 days, we cooled the skin and kept it dry. By the 4th day, the rash eased and the cough quieted. The girl's mother thanked Layla with both hands. Layla turned her shoulders half toward me and half away. The thanks slid off me like rain from a leaf. After they left, I sat on the bench and watched the road. The dust rose and fell behind the last traveler like a thought that refuses to settle. I did not want to be a rock in the road of my sister's pride. I did not want to be a shadow on her son. But I felt the itch in my chest, the itch of leaving a truth unspoken. That night, under the stars, I took Grandmother's stool and placed it beside the doorway. I sat on the cool ground and leaned my back against the wall. Layla came and sat on the stool. She tucked her legs under her and took off her earrings, one by one, laying them on her palm like small moons. "Do you think I take what is yours?" she asked, very quiet. I breathed in the smell of the earth after the night's first dew. "I think people give it to you," I said. "I think you do not turn away from the gift." Layla turned the earrings in her hand, and they clicked softly, like the smallest shells. "I love them," she said, and her voice surprised me. She sounded like the little girl who used to chase butterflies by the river until the water scolded her toes. "Not the earrings," she added, seeing my glance. "The faces. The faces when they feel well. The smile. The tears. The stories they tell later, and the way those stories keep me company when I lie down to sleep." "I love that too," I said. "But the stories turn, Layla. They spin a thread. If you hold the thread too tight, it breaks." She nodded, and we sat with the words between us like a small bowl of water, shining. Neither of us drank. We did not go further, because the next words would have been about credit and care and fairness. And we were tired. Early the next morning, before our front yard had its first footprints, a horn sounded from the road. It was not a festival horn. It had a strong, steady tone like the call of a bird of prey. People looked up from their cooking, from their washing, from the small work that makes life go. A horse approached, and on its back sat a messenger in deep blue, the color of distant water. The cloth of his turban caught the light. He raised a hand, and those who knew him pointed and whispered, "A messenger from the palace." He stopped at the old baobab and read from a folded strip of leather where words had been pressed by careful hands. "By the word of Queen Mara," he called, his voice clear. "The healer whose hands bring peace is invited to the palace at Stone Hill. One test will be given. One patient will be entrusted. Truth will be known. Respect and reward will follow." He lowered the leather and waited. The road to our courtyard began to fill before he could even turn his horse. Children ran ahead of him to show the way. Women pulled scarves to cover their hair. Men straightened their caps. The messenger's horse tossed its head at a fly, then lowered it as if to listen. The messenger handed the leather to the children to hold for a breath, and they giggled at the weight of it. When he reached our doorway, Layla was already standing there, spine straight, palms open. I rose from the bench, wiping my hands on a clean cloth. The messenger dismounted and bowed. "Sisters," he said, "one of you has been spoken of in the Queen's Hall. It is said her hands make restless hearts lie down and rest. It is said her touch teaches bones to remember their shape. No one had told me that our stories had traveled that far. For a heartbeat, I felt the pride that comes when the wind carries your name like a kite. Then I remembered that names can be set down and picked up by others. With respect, Layla said, "You are welcome." "I am Layla," he smiled at her, polite. "And you?" he asked, turning to me. "Amma," I said. "The queen asks you to come," he said. "She offers lodging and protection and a fair ear. The test is gentle. It will show what is true." I opened my mouth to say, "I accept." Before I could speak, Layla took a step forward, not a bold step, not a greedy one, just a step. "We accept," she said. "I am the healer you seek," the words hung in the air. The messenger did not flinch. He had likely heard much worse from people who wanted favor. He looked from Layla to me and back again. "You will both come," he said wisely. "The queen will know what to make of two." Layla exhaled with relief, as if she had been holding her breath until that moment. She reached for my hand and she squeezed it. Her palm was warm and a little damp. It was not a victory squeeze. It was a plea for unity, or so I chose to feel. I squeezed back. The courtyard breathed again. People began to talk at once. Some clapped Layla on the back. Some nodded to me. Abina limped in and hugged us both with the balance of someone who knows how to give equal measure in two arms. "Go well," she said. "Come back with blessings. We had to prepare." The messenger would leave at sunset, and we were to travel with him. We had a few hours to tend to those waiting in our yard, to gather what we needed, to tell our mother, who lived 3 courtyards away, that we would be gone for a while. We gathered dried leaves of neem and hibiscus, ginger, charcoal, bandages, honey. We gathered cloth for wrapping and oil for mixing. We gathered our small book with twine and the pen carved from reed. I packed them with the care I would pack food for a child's long walk. Our mother looked at us with eyes full of both fear and pride. She had given birth to us in the same month in different years, 2 girls who grew like 2 mangoes on one branch, leaning toward the same light. She held us by the head, both of us, and kissed our foreheads. "Remember your grandmother's steps," she said. "Remember that your hands serve before they command. Remember that truth is not a knife. It is a seed." We promised we would remember. My throat tightened around the promise, because promises are serious food. They feed you or choke you. By late afternoon, the sun had softened its glare, and long shadows stretched across the road like ribbons. We mounted the cart the messenger had arranged. Nothing grand. A simple rolling bed behind a sturdy donkey who responded to kindness more than to the switch. Layla sat facing forward, and I sat facing backward, so I could watch our home slide away. The baobab tree looked over us until a bend in the path took it from view. I touched the small twine around my book and felt steadier. The road to Stone Hill wound through valleys where the grass whispered like old friends. It climbed past fields where the last of the ground nuts had been lifted, past gates where goats stood like stones and blinked slowly. We crossed a narrow bridge over the river, and the way the water moved beneath us made a pattern of light on the underside of the bridge. Children waved from the bank. Someone called my name. Someone called Layla's. The sound lasted until it became too small to separate from the rest of the world's hum. We did not talk much at first. Sometimes the breath we save makes room for what must be said later. The messenger rode ahead, his back firm, his hands steady on the reins, as if he could feel not just the road, but the purpose in it. Birds gathered at the edges of fields and rose as one when the cart approached, a living cloud. As dusk came and a soft gold lay on the hills, Layla spoke. "If the queen asks who healed the child with the long cough," she said, "what will you say?" "I will say what happened," I answered. "And what happened?" she asked. But she knew. "You told the story," I said. I cooled the chest. "You comforted the mother. I measured breaths at midnight. You sang at dawn. We both stood when it was hard. And in the end, the child's body did what it knows how to do when it is helped. It healed." Layla sighed. "You will say it that way," she said, "and it will be true. But watchers do not always hear soft truth. They like the sharp sound. Sometimes I have given them the sharp because I thought it would help. The sharp cuts the knot and the rope is free and the story can move. Sometimes knots protect the rope," I said. She laughed then, not unkindly. "You talk like grandmother." "She is the voice I have when I am wise," I said. We reached a rest stop where a very old tree leaned over a shallow pool. The messenger watered the donkey and the horse. We drank from our gourds and ate bread that tasted of the hands that baked it, patient and sure. An old woman selling roasted plantain waved us over and pressed more into our hands than the coins we offered could buy. "Travel well," she said, and to me she added, "Your grandmother cured my son's fever after 3 other healers told me to wait and pray." She prayed too, and then she worked. Her eyes shone in the half-light. Her prayer tasted like work. "Do you know that kind?" "I hope I do," I said. She patted my arm. "The Queen has a sharp eye," she said. "She will see your prayer if it is in your hands." We traveled on. The stars came out as if someone had breathed the coals of the sky back into bright. The moon rose thinner than a fingernail. We spoke of small things to pass the time. The way frogs sing after rain, the way the smell of wet dust makes the chest open, the taste of tamarind when you have walked a long way and your tongue is dry. Layla took off her wrap and folded it into a pillow. She looked at me in the starlight. "I do not want us to stand far apart," she said. "Do you hear me, Amma? I want us to walk near." I looked at our feet, which sat near each other on the cart bed, not touching. "Then we must learn how to share a road," I said. "If we push each other into the grass, we both lose our path." She nodded, and her eyes shone. "Forgive me for the times I stepped into your space." "I forgive you," I said, because she had asked, and because forgiveness does better in the body when it stays moving instead of being set aside for a later day. "And forgive me for my silence when it made more trouble than speaking." She smiled, and in that smile I saw the child who once cried when a beetle lost its way and helped it back to the underside of a leaf. "Forgiven," she said, and I felt something open in my chest as if a window had lifted. We arrived at Stonehill near midnight. The palace rose from the rock like a promise, sturdy and graceful. The walls were the color of the dry season moon, and the doors were carved with patterns that reminded me of river water. Torches flickered along the outer wall, making the shadows of the guards bend and straighten like trees in a storm. The messenger called out and a gate opened. We rolled inside. The courtyard was wide. Water ran in a narrow channel between 2 edges and sang over stone in a high, clear voice. I smelled roasted meat, smoke, and a faint spice I could not name. A woman approached us with a tray. Her wrap was simple. Her hair was tied back. Lines at the corners of her eyes said she smiled often. "I am Kima," she said. "I keep the Queen's house in order. You will sleep now. The Queen will send for you in the morning." I bowed my head. Layla did the same. We were led to a small room with mats, clean cloth, a basin of water, and a window that framed the night sky. I washed the road from my hands and dried them on cloth that smelled of sun. I lay down and listened to the palace breathing, quiet footsteps, a low voice, the murmur of the water in the channel. Sleep came like a mother who puts a hand on your hair and tells you to rest because tomorrow there is work. Before dawn, I woke with the feeling that someone had spoken my name. Maybe it was only my thoughts. I sat up and listened. Birds were already discussing the day outside the window. In the courtyard, someone drew water. The scrape of the pot against stone made a sound that I had known since childhood. The familiarity steadied me. I thought of the test. I had never been tested like this. At home, my work was woven into the fabric of a day. People knew me. They brought me stories along with their symptoms. Here, I would stand under the gaze of a queen and strangers, and I would place my hands on a body that would not know me. Could my hands still listen when every eye in the room wanted a loud answer? I took out my small book tied with twine and opened it to the page where I had written, in a firm hand, words my grandmother said to me when I first measured a fever and did not panic. Presence is a medicine. Beneath that, in my own small print, I had added, and patience is the spoon that gives it. Layla woke with a yawn, sat up and rubbed her eyes. Her hair had come a little loose and it made her look like herself, unadorned. "Are you afraid?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "A little. Me too," she said. "But I also feel something like the moment before you jump into the river on a very hot day." That is fear, I said, smiling. And joy, she said. Both. We washed and dressed. We tied our wraps carefully. We braided our hair back. We did not put on earrings. We chose plainness that morning as if plainness itself were a prayer. Kima returned with bowls of porridge and pieces of sweet ripe mango. The porridge was warm, not hot, and the mango cooled our mouths after the first spoonful. Kima watched us with a kind eye. The queen's mother was a midwife, she said. She learned to listen to women who spoke two languages at once, words and pain. The queen was a child at her side. She learned to read both. So she will see us, Layla said. She will see what you show, Kima replied. No more, no less. When Kima left, Layla leaned close. I will not crowd you, she said softly. If they ask us to work together, I will follow your lead. If they ask us to work apart, I will do what I know and remember to ask questions. Thank you, I said. If we work apart, I will respect your way. And if I see something that could cause trouble, I will say so. We sat for a while without speaking and listened to our breaths, in and out, like waves, like steps, like the small pumps that keep blood moving, unseen and faithful. I pressed my palms together and felt their warmth meet. I remembered my grandmother pressing my fingers to her pulse. I kissed the twine of my book and put it away. When the knock came, my hands did not jump. They opened. Kima stood in the doorway, and behind her, in the light of the hall, stood a tall woman with eyes the color of wet stone and a presence that made the air feel cared for. She wore simple cloth, not the heavy gold I had imagined. She carried herself like a reed that bends and does not break. It is good that you are awake, she said. I am Queen Mara. Come, sisters. We followed her through a hall where the walls were painted with scenes of harvest and river, birth and old age, laughter and mourning. The pictures reminded me that the same house holds both joy and pain, and that a good roof respects both. We reached a room where the air felt cool and a clean light fell from an opening in the ceiling. A mat lay on the floor. Beside it sat a woman with eyes red from not sleeping. On the mat, a child rested, her breath shallow, a furrow between her brows. Her little hands curled near her face like tender leaves. A bowl, a cloth, a small jar of oil, and a pitcher of water stood on a low table. Mother Kima stood by the door, her face calm. A man in a simple robe leaned against the far wall, arms folded, watching in a way that did not feel cruel, only careful. Queen Mara gestured with her hand and spoke in a voice that was clear but soft. My people bring me many tales. Among them are the tales of your hands. I will hear the truth, not by argument, not by debate, but by service. This child is named Suli. She is 4 years old. She has been ill for 2 days and a night. She has eaten little, drunk little. She is hot in the morning and cold in the afternoon. She coughs sometimes and cries from a pain she does not have words to name. Her mother is called Ida. She has not slept. You will each care for the child one at a time. You may use only what is in this room. You may speak to the mother. We will watch. We will not interrupt. Is that understood? Layla and I answered yes in the same breath. Who will begin? The queen asked. Layla turned to me. Amma, she said, and the small word was a kindness that felt heavy, like a blanket laid over my shoulders. I looked at the child on the mat. I breathed in once to ground myself. I moved slowly, the way you move when the air around a candle is fragile. I knelt, my knees found the mat. I put my hand near but not on the child's arm to feel the heat that rose invisible. I greeted Ida, the mother, with my eyes and then with words. We are here together, I said. We will go step by step. She nodded, holding her own arms around her like a shrinking shawl. The room fell into a gentle hush. The world narrowed to a child, a mother, a mat, a small set of tools, and my hands. I felt Grandmother Sifa lay her old hand over mine from a place beyond sight. I listened to Suli's breath. The time between inhales told me tiredness. The tiny catch near the end told me there was something that did not want to leave. I touched the side of her neck for the heartbeat and counted without numbers. letting the pace speak its truth. I pressed near the ribs to feel if she guarded, if she pulled away. She did not strongly. I looked at her lips, dry. I looked at her eyes. She shifted her gaze to the light and away again as if it hurt. I looked at the mother's hands. The skin on her knuckles was cracked, a sign of washing and watching. I asked, "Is water available when she wants to drink?" Ida's eyes filled. "She turns her face away," she said. "She only wants to sleep. Has she urinated today?" I asked gently. "A little," Ida whispered, almost ashamed of the smallness of the answer. I nodded, not to scold, but to acknowledge the shape of the trouble. I took the cloth and dipped it in the water. I wrung it out and pressed it over Suli's forehead, then the back of her neck, then her chest. I lifted her a little and slid my hand beneath her back to feel if sweat had collected under her. The mat was damp. I slid a dry cloth under her where she lay and smoothed it to pull the moisture away from her skin. "Will you help me?" I asked Ida. She nodded and moved to the other side. We worked as if we had practiced together for years. I offered Suli a sip of water from a spoon, not a cup, so that swallowing would not feel like a task. Her lips met the spoon. She licked. "Tiny," we repeated. "The sun moves one finger's width at a time and still crosses the sky." I hummed, not a song for listeners, only a tone that matched her breath, sparing her our need to fill silence. I rubbed oil into the arches of her feet and into the soft meat of her palm so that the nerves there could tell her brain, "You are cared for. You may soften. Let go now. What you need to let go." Minutes passed, maybe more. Time in that room was not the time outside. The queen did not speak. The watchers watched. A fly drifted in and circled and found the window light and left again. The child's breath began to lengthen. The furrow in her brow eased. She coughed once, a wet sound, and I rolled her gently to her side, wiping her mouth with the cloth so the wet would leave, not go back where it had no business. "Good," I whispered. I asked Ida for the story of the day before the illness. She told me about a walk in the market, the dust, the heat, a mango sold by a woman whose hands had split skin. I was not hunting blame. I was collecting small stones to lay in a path that led from well to well. "Did she play near the cooking fire?" I asked. "Yes." "Did she cry more than usual?" "Yes." "Did she wet the bed?" "No." "Did she swallow well?" "No." I kept moving like a river that wants to reach the sea but respects the stones. I cooled where heat was too much, warmed where blood needed a nudge, lifted where moisture trapped, lowered where tension held. When I looked up, the queen's eyes were not on me. They were on Ida's shoulders. I noticed that Ida's shoulders had dropped an inch since we began. I offered Suli more spoonfuls of water. She took them, now with a small, purposeful greed that made me breathe out with relief. Her hands opened. Her fingers uncurled. She sighed, a deep, heavy sigh, and that beautiful sign. That sign Grandmother Sifa had taught me to listen for came like a gift. The sign that a child's body has moved from the fight into the friend part of healing. I felt a tear slip down my cheek. Not for beauty, for gratitude. For the fact that the world, sometimes even often, returns kindness with ease. I sat back on my heels and looked at Ida. "She is moving in a good direction," I said. "This is not the end of care. We may have work ahead, but for now, you can breathe." Ida pressed her hand to her mouth and nodded. Her shoulders dropped again. Queen Mara stepped forward and placed her palm on Ida's back, a gentle, respectful touch. Then she turned toward Layla. "It is your turn," she said. "What will you add?" Layla rose. She moved with her usual grace, but her face was different. It held more of our conversation on the cart than our afternoons under the tree. She checked the child's temperature with the back of her wrist. She listened to the breath with her ear close to the small chest. She asked Ida for her own story, how long since she, the mother, had drunk water, how long she had slept, how her heart felt in the night. Ida's answer was a tumble. She had not slept. She had not drunk. Her heart had run like a goat. "Then I will borrow your hands," Layla said gently, and she taught Ida the small circles to rub on her child's back, the slow sweep on the belly, the the slight shake near the shoulder to loosen what clung. She showed the mother how to sing a very simple song, one our grandmother had hummed, one that moves by a scale so natural that even a tired voice can find it. "Sing it to tell your own heart to slow," Layla said. "When your heart slows, hers will feel it through your hands." I sat back and watched my sister be a true healer. She did not press hard. She did not tell a legend. She guided a mother to lead the river. Suli coughed again, less wet, more free. She took more water from the spoon, and then, with the permission she had given herself, she slept. Not the heavy sleep of fever, the steady sleep of repair, Queen Mara nodded. The man at the wall, who I now recognized as the chief advisor by the way others' eyes went to him without thought, leaned forward and then relaxed. Kima's mouth, which often seemed to consider a smile and keep it for later, let the smile go. "Enough," the queen said softly. "Let her rest." We moved to the side of the room. The light from the ceiling fell on the mat like blessing. Ida did not move her hand from her child's back. I saw by the way her fingers barely sank that Suli's breathing had begun to deepen. Queen Mara turned to us. "You know our land," she said. "You know the way dust and heat and hunger and water become a story. You know a mother's shoulder is part of the patient. You know that curing is not a performance. Now tell me, sisters, who among you has the hands the tales speak of?" I looked at Layla. She looked at me. The air in my chest went light and ready. The tilt of her head told me she had arrived at a set of steps we had named but not yet climbed. She opened her mouth. "And the choice we would live with? The choice we had been traveling toward since the morning my palms learned to listen, sat in the space before her first word." Layla's lips parted. She looked at me, then at the child sleeping on the mat with her mother's hand resting between her shoulder blades. The light from the ceiling made a soft square across the mat, and dust hung in it like tiny seeds waiting for a breeze. In that bright pause, I heard the water in the narrow channel outside. I heard a bird cry from the courtyard. I heard my own breath trying to do two things at once: keep calm and hurry. "My sister's hands taught mine how to listen," Layla said. The words came out low. She did not raise her chin. She did not bow it either. "I have loved the songs people sang about me. I have also loved their faces when they felt well. I will not pretend I do not like praise. But if the tales reached you, Queen Mara, they rode partly on my sister's work. I have often taken the brighter place in the circle. Amma has often stood in the shade. We are here together now. Let the patient teach the truth." The queen's eyes did not flash with surprise. They warmed, the way stones warm when the early sun finds them. She looked from Layla to me, then back to the child, still breathing softly, cheeks damp with the last traces of fever. "Very well," she said. "Truth speaks in the actions we choose next. The test continues. The child will need care through the day and into the night. I ask you to shape the care together and also apart. First, Amma will shape 1 hour of care while Layla observes. Then Layla will shape 1 hour while Amma observes. Then you will work side by side as if you were at home, taking cues from what the child's body says. You may ask the mother questions. You may request only what is in this room: water, cloth, oil, the bowl, the pitcher. If more water is needed, ask and it will be brought. No herbs, no fire, no added scents. Let simplicity show what you know." She glanced toward Ida, whose shoulders had lowered again into a position a person can keep for a while. "Ida, you may do what these sisters teach you, and you may refuse anything that does not feel right for you or your child. The child belongs to you first." "Yes, my queen," Ida whispered. She brushed her lips on Suli's hair. I felt relief at the rules. They were a mercy to my type of work. The simple tools of warmth, coolness, water, touch, time, and attention, that was my small garden, and I knew how to tend it. Layla's eye met mine for a second, and in that look I read both worry and determination. If she could not reach for a shining object, could she find her way with the plane? I believed she could. I hoped she would. Shall we begin? Queen Mara asked. I knelt again. The mat remembered my knees from moments before, which comforted me for no practical reason. I set the bowl near the pitcher, and I poured a little water. I dipped a cloth and wrung it until it did not drip. I touched the back of my own wrist to Suli's forehead. A grandmother's test, but a true one. Warm, not burning? The flush along her cheeks had faded. The little furrow between her eyes was a shallow line now instead of a groove. "Ida," I said, "you did well to stay near. Now I want to show you two small things to continue. The first is to help her body find its comfortable heat. We will use cool just enough to invite ease, not enough to frighten the blood. We will put the cloth here." I folded the cloth once and laid it over the back of Suli's neck. "Not on the chest now. She is not burning. Just here, where the little rivers that carry heat run close." I watched, ready to adjust. Suli did not shiver. "Good." "The second is the spoon again," I continued. I lifted the spoon and dipped it into the bowl. "When she is awake enough, see her lashes flutter, offer a small sip. Speak her name. If she turns away, wait. If she tries, praise her. If she coughs, do not rush to offer more. Let the cough do its good work, and then rest 10 breaths. As I spoke, I measured. I watched the rise of her chest, the small pause at the top, the release. Does she guard? I pressed lightly at the edge of her ribs. No. Did her belly pull in hard at the bottom of the breath? A little. I hummed the soft tone again, and her belly softened a shade. Is her tongue dry like a dry leaf? I lifted her lip quietly with my little finger. Dry but not cracked. The inside of her eyelid, when I opened it briefly and gently, was a good color. Not pale, not yet. I looked at her hands. The small lines had returned in her palms. They were not stretched smooth by heat. I looked at her feet. The toes were wiggling against nothing. That is a sign I love in young ones. The body begins to play, even in small ways, when it feels safe. Layla stood a pace behind me. She watched without fidgeting. That told me something. She had tethered her need to act and chosen to learn. It is not easy for any of us, in a room that holds a queen and a child in trouble, to rest in watching. We want to help in the way that shows. Many good hands have shaken because they could not be still. Layla was still. Her hands rested folded at her waist. The bracelets she had not worn left bare wrist, and the skin there looked younger than the skin on the back of her hand. She was not decorated this morning, but she was beautiful in another way, clear and present. Suli stirred. Her lashes braided open and closed, then stayed open. Her eyes met mine, then slid to the square of light in the ceiling, as if to ask for a better story than the one her body had been telling. Suli, I said, and let her name be a soft drum. I am Amma. This is your mother. This is my sister, Layla. We want to help your body drink and rest. Will you take one tiny spoon? Her eyes moved to the spoon. Her lips parted. Ida helped cradle her shoulders into a soft angle, and I set the spoon to the corner of her mouth. A sip went in. She swallowed. It was a small, brave river. I did not cheer because that would push the river. I simply breathed out slow so the air would not turn tight with our hope. She took another. Then she turned her face away, a dignified refusal. I respected it. I did not chase her mouth with the spoon. I set it down and stroked her forehead once with 2 fingers. Good, I murmured. Ida smiled with her mouth closed, as if not to let joy escape too fast. We moved like that for the hour. Cloth, spoon, shift, stop. The room found a rhythm. I lifted Suli's arm and let it fall from a small height to feel how heavy her relaxed body was compared to how heavy she would be if she clung to tension. Heavy. Good. Her lips moistened. A small pearl of pale urine appeared on the dry cloth beneath her when Ida lifted her hips to slide a fresh cloth under. I saw it, and my eyes pricked with relief. I did not point. The mother saw it too. Our glances met like hands. While we worked, I spoke quietly to Edda about the shape of the day ahead, keeping her own cup near. Sips for herself when she offered sips to her child, as if they were one bowl shared between 2 mouths. Sleep in pieces when Suli slept. Clean cloth when the old cloth felt warm from being touched. I did not give a lecture. I offered little stones to lay on a path she was already walking. When the hour had almost slipped away, I sat back and looked at the line between Suli's brows. It had nearly disappeared. I let it be. I wrapped the cloth and wrung it once more from habit than need. Layla stepped forward, and the Queen's eyes moved with her. "I learned," Layla said quietly to me. "I will keep your steps in my mind." She turned to Ida. "May I shape the next hour?" Ida nodded, her hand never really leaving her child. A mother's hand can be doing 10 things while it rests. Layla began not with a dramatic move, but with a question. "Where is your tiredness, Ida?" she asked. "In your face? Your neck? Your shoulders?" "In my chest," Ida said. "It runs like a goat." "Then lend it to me," Layla said gently, and she positioned Ida behind Suli. She guided Ida's left hand to rest under the small ribs, not pressing, just present. She placed the right hand along Suli's back. "Now breathe so that your hands lift a little and then fall," Layla said. "Not for me. Not for the Queen. For your child. Let her borrow the calm you ask from your own breath." Ida took a breath. It was too big, too showy. Layla smiled once and shook her head, not scolding. "Smaller," she said. "Like you smelled a flower and did not want to disturb the smell." Ida tried again. Better. Suli's little back rose and fell against her mother's palm. "Now," Layla said. "Hum just a line like this?" She hummed the small tune our grandmother liked. Do. Ra, my, do slow, as if each note were a foot on a step you do not want to miss. Ida joined. The two voices made a ribbon. It did not decorate anything. It tied things together. When Suli coughed, it was looser. Layla rolled her gently to the side again, as I had done before, and wiped her mouth with the cloth. She did not move quickly or slowly. She moved at the pace of the cough. The cough led. Layla followed. That is a skill I admired and had not always seen in my sister. She looked up at me, and her eyes asked a question without words, and my nod answered without words. We had traveled a long way to arrive at this simple exchange. After the cough, Layla touched the soft pad under Suli's thumb, pressed in little circles, then released. She did not press hard, just enough to wake the nerve. She did the same at the arch of the foot, where we all hold a map of the body in miniature. She spoke to Ada in little stories to pass the time. Not big tales of leaps and new names, but small remembrances. The day she saw a mother carry a sleeping child and walk like a cup with water to the lip. The day our grandmother took us to the river and taught us to look at the current before stepping in. I breathed easier as I watched. Layla can be a bright banner in a wind, but that morning she chose to be shade. The hour moved like a long bead through a string of breaths. When it was done, the Queen lifted a hand and Layla stepped back. We did not need to speak to know what came next. We would work side by side, as we do when the courtyard is busy, hands crossing and making one work out of two hearts. We did. We alternated the spoon. We changed the cloth. I checked skin. Layla measured the small hum and kept its line level. When Suli turned her face toward the ceiling and opened her mouth as if to ask for something without words, Layla understood the question, and I understood the answer. "No food yet," I said gently. "First more water, and then more rest." The rules did not allow food anyway. But even if they had, we would have waited. Appetite can wake before the stomach has wiped its table. Midday heat crept into the room, even with the cool of the palace stone. The square of light shifted and lost its rigid lines. The edges softened. The Queen had sat beside the wall on a carved stool, and now she stood and walked to the window opening, drew the curtain half closed so the light would fall kinder. Even queens care for the direction of light. For a while we rested inside the rhythm we had made. Then a test arrived on its own, as tests often do. Suli's body, having given up its first hard holding, began to shiver. A small, uncertain shiver like a leaf that cannot decide if it is the wind or its own stem that trembles. Ida looked at me, panic blooming behind her eyes. Panic can undo easy progress faster than a fever. I lifted my hand in a slow motion toward Ida's shoulder. "We are ready," I said softly. "We will not chase the cold. We will invite warmth." I took the dry cloth we had set aside and folded it twice. I rubbed it between my hands to warm it, simple as that. I slid it under Suli's back where the damp cloth had been pulled earlier. Layla gathered the corner of the child's wrap and draped it over her arms, leaving the forehead and neck free. "We do not trap the heat," Layla murmured, and though I would have explained differently, the act matched the wisdom. "Cover the limbs, not the head." The shiver eased, returned, eased. We did not change too many things at once. We stayed steady so the child's body could borrow our steadiness. Suli coughed, and this time there was more sound in it, a little bark, then a wetness. I rolled her to the side on my arm and patted the back with a cupped hand. The sound softened and then stopped. She cried once, not a hard cry, just a complaint. Ida's hum stayed true. "Good," I said. My heart had raced for a beat, then slowed as if a drum had found the old rhythm again after a fancy flourish. Her shiver faded. A sheen of sweat showed along her hairline. The line between her brows had gone. Her breath found a new depth that made me think of a well-being filled after a dry spell. Small signs, a handful of stones set in order, make a road. As the light shifted, Queen Mara stepped forward. "Pause," she said, and her voice did not cut. It rapped. "I ask not to stop care. I ask to see one more kind of truth. Healers, explain to me why you have chosen each step you chose." We looked at one another. It felt strange to lay words on top of the work while still inside it. The work itself makes its own language. The sound of a cough, the pace of a breath, the warmth under the skin. And sometimes words feel like stepping on a small bridge made of paper. Still, the Queen had asked kindly, and this was her test. People in the room moved slightly, as people do when they expect reason. I spoke. "We use the cloth at the neck because the vessels there run close to the skin. Heat leaves in peace from that place if invited. We did not drench. We did not rub hard. We did not lay the cloth on the chest because we wanted to help the body open, not startle it. We used the spoon, not the cup, to make drinking small and successful. We rolled the child to cough and did not flatten her chest because the body wants help to move what is loose to the mouth where it can leave. We watched the mother's shoulders because a child borrows a mother's nervous system. When we calmed hers, the child's body felt safe to do what it knows." Layla added, "We sang not for show but to steady timing. A simple, slow tune pulls a heart toward it like a tide. We placed dry warmth under the child when she shivered because you send warmth from underneath to invite the small vessels to relax, but you let the head stay free so heat can leave. We did not change too many variables at once, because when you move 3 pieces, you cannot tell which move spoke to the body." The Queen nodded. "And why not herbs?" she asked, not challenging, simply curious. "Herbs are strong and useful when chosen well," I said. "We did not have them, and I did not wish for them. In this case, the body asked for rest, water, and kindness more than it asked for bitterness or fire. If this continued tomorrow, I might think differently." "Good," Queen Mara said. "And now, one more thing. Heal me only with your attention. Tell me what I have done since dawn that my back tells you about now." The room was very quiet. It felt almost like a joke, but not a joke to make someone small. A small smile touched the corners of the Queen's mouth. The smile of someone who knows the answer and wants to see if you trust your eyes. I looked at her body. She stood balanced on both feet, not favoring one, but her left shoulder was half an inch higher than her right. The skin along her neck held tiny lines that deepened when she turned to look at Kima. From the way she had just pulled the curtain, not roughly, but with a sure arm. I guess she had been using her hand since morning. There was no ink on her fingers, but the faint press in her right thumb told me she had held something with pressure. She had also sat still for a long time earlier, watching. "You lifted something heavy this morning," I said. Not with anger. With care, she tilted her head. "What?" she asked. "A child," I said. "Or an old person." "Not a pot. You held a body. You did not want to wake it." The Queen laughed, light and true. "My daughter fell asleep on the bench as the sun rose," she said. "She is taller now than my lap would like." I carried her to her mat. And yes, my back speaks of it. The room softened. Even the chief advisor's mouth relaxed. "At home," Layla said. "Our grandmother used to say, A ruler who remembers the weight of a child will not forget the weight of a poor man's grief. Queen Mara's eyes warmed again, and her heart, I think, stepped a little closer to us. Your grandmother was wise, she said. Rest your eyes now. The child is peaceful for this moment. Kima will bring more water. We did not rest our bodies. We rested our minds for a breath. We let the quiet be quiet. Kima returned with a pitcher that sweated in the warm air. Drops ran down and made small, perfect circles on the tray and then joined to a puddle. She set it down as if setting down a small bird. When can we feed her? Ida asked, her voice filled not with impatience but with longing for normal things. A bowl in a child's hands, a spoon carried to a mouth, a sigh after, the piece of a small belly filled. Not yet, I said. When the little river of urine runs better and the cough has cleared a little more, then something light. I looked at the queen. With permission. Of course, Queen Mara said. But I will ask you to decide what and when. I will ask you to tell me why. The afternoon wore on. The square of light moved along the floor and climbed the wall and then slid toward the opposite corner. Suli woke fully once and wanted to sit. A test. Standing too soon could spin her head. I balanced the wish and the wisdom. Let me lift you, I said, and I slid my arm behind her shoulders, set her against my chest, made my breathing her chair. Layla adjusted the cloths. Ida's hand did not leave her. We counted 5 breaths together. Then we lowered her again. She had visited the world of sitting and returned whole. She sighed, and the sigh told me she felt bigger inside her ribs than she had felt all morning. At one point, the chief advisor came near, his robe whispering. He watched the way I opened Suli's hand and rubbed along the tiny bones. What does that do? He asked, his voice low enough not to disturb. It tells the nerves we are not fighting them, I said. It reminds the brain that the hand can be open and still safe. Ah, he said, and I could tell by the way his eyes lowered to his own hand that he felt the truth of it in his palm. In that same hour, a small pain creased Suli's face as she swallowed. Layla leaned close. The tea we would make at home, the mild one, she whispered, not for the queen, but for me. I think of it, and then I remember the rule. I nodded. We have water, I said. We also have time. Time is not bitter, but it can do the work of bitterness, she smiled. It was a slow smile, the kind that grows only when a person truly shares a belief. As the day stretched and then began to fold, Suli's urine came more, and then regularly enough that the cloths beneath her needed changing more than once. This is not fine talk for a palace, but it is the finest talk for a mother. Each change was a little celebration we did not make loud. Ida's eyes found mine, found Layla's, and said without words, "Thank you for counting what matters with me." Queen Mara did not leave the room for long. When she did, she sent Kima and left the door open so that the sound of the water in the channel could still reach us. She did not speak often. When she did, it was to ask soft questions. What do you listen for when you listen to the belly? When do you let the cough be, and when do you interrupt it? What tells you the difference between a child ready for food and a child ready for more water? We answered with our hands and then with words. It felt like laying a cloth on a table before setting a bowl on it, respect before nourishment. Late afternoon, Ida's head nodded forward and then jerked back. Exhaustion, the kind that makes a body forget itself for a breath and then remember the child and return. I touched her wrist. Sleep, I said. 10 breaths. We will watch. She shook her head, afraid to let go. Layla reached for her and drew Ida's head to her own shoulder. 10 breaths, Layla repeated, and she began to count in a soft voice that sounded almost like that hum, only she rested on each number as if it were a small creek stone. Ida slept 10 breaths, then 10 more, then woke with a start. She did not apologize. She looked at her child, saw her breathing, and let out something that was part laugh, part tear. When evening stepped into the room in a blue shawl, Kima brought a small oil lamp and set it on a low shelf. The lamp's flame made the room kind, not bright. The heat of the day left as if it had been a polite guest who knew when to go. Queen Mara moved her stool nearer to the wall with the pictures. In the lamplight, Birth and Harvest seemed to breathe. Will she eat soon? Etta asked again, not pressing, only hoping. Yes, I said. Soon. What first? The Queen asked, her voice teaching even in the asking. Porridge, I said. Warm if we can. Salt, not sweet. The first bowl will do more than fill her belly. It will tell her body that the day is ending and new strength can begin. But we must be sure her stomach is ready to hold. She has swallowed water well. She has coughed without choking. Her belly is not hard. We will begin with a half spoon, then wait. Then another. May we send for porridge? The Queen asked. I looked at Layla. It felt like breaking the rule and keeping the larger law. Yes, we said together. Kima nodded and slipped away. When she returned with the porridge, the steam rose and carried a smell that took me back home. To our mother's courtyard. To a night when I was 9 and had been sick for a day, and my grandmother had fed me like this, half a spoon, then wait, then another, while the sound of the river had mended my sleep. That memory was a cloak around my shoulders. We fed Suli with the small, patient way that makes the first meal after illness an offering, not a test. She took the first bit and frowned at the new feeling. She took the second and did not frown. She took the third and then turned her face away, satisfied for now. The little river of comfort that shows up between a child's eyes when the belly feels the first warm weight appeared. Ida cried openly then, not ugly, not loud, just water running the way it wants to run when a dam lifts. The chief advisor cleared his throat, not to silence anyone, but to take the Queen's attention. My Queen, he said, respectful. The council waits for your word before we send news to the towns. You asked me to prepare a message. Shall we write that the healer has been found? The room pulled tight as a drum for a breath. Words can be messengers with too much speed if we set them running before we lace their sandals. The Queen did not answer at once. She looked at the mat, at the bowl, at the mother, at the sisters. She walked a small circle with her eyes and then sat a moment. Then she rose. Not yet, she said. Let us honor the night. Let us honor the child. Let us honor the truth that began this morning and is still being made by hands and choices. The council will have its words when the story is finished. I have learned to trust slow ink. As if the night wanted to show us one more step we still needed to climb, Suli's cough returned sharper in the early dark. It came sudden, a spasm that stiffened her small throat and made the breath hitch and catch. Etta made a sound that was almost a cry. My heart jumped. Layla's hand flew to the child's chest and then stopped a finger's width above, not pressing. She looked at me, and in that look was a question and an answer. I will follow your lead. I rolled Suli to her side again, supported her chin with 2 fingers, and tapped lightly along the back in the same cupped rhythm. The cough loosened. She spit a small string of thick wetness into the cloth. The sound of that string landing was the sweetest sound in the room. We waited, counted 10 breaths in our heads, listened for the body's next choice. No more spasm, just a softer whisper of air moving. Good girl, Ida whispered, and her voice broke and mended in one syllable. The oil lamp flame fluttered once and then stood straight. The Queen had come close. She had not fetched a new rule or stepped with a royal foot where a mother's feet needed to be. She simply watched with that precise attention I had come to trust in the short time I knew her. When the room softened again, she said, There are court healers who will ask why I have asked sisters from a far village to touch a child in the palace. I will answer them with what I saw, hands that make a mother stronger, voices that make a child's breath less afraid, work that chooses patience over display. We are not done, but I see enough to sleep without fear. She looked at Layla then, and her gaze did not narrow or widen. It held. You spoke of praise, she said. What will you do with it if it lands on you tomorrow? Layla did not look down. She did not search for a clever sentence. She turned her face toward Ida and toward me and let the answer come from that direction. If praise is given to me for work Amma has done, I will not take it, she said. If praise is given for what we shared, I will let it sit in the middle and not pull it to my side. If praise is given for my own steps, I will feel it, and then I will put it to work, by teaching what I can to others, so that praise is not the end of the work, but the beginning of another's learning. And you? The queen asked, turning to me. If silence is offered where you deserve sound? I will tell the truth in small sentences, I said. Not to win, but to keep the work clean. If a young healer's eyes are watching, and they learn the wrong story, their hands will have to unlearn later, at a price. I would rather they learn it now, with gentleness. Queen Mara nodded slowly, as if she were folding a cloth and smoothing it with both palms before placing it on a shelf where she could find it again in the morning. I hear you, she said. Let us do one more thing before the night presses us apart. Each of you, teach Kima something small that she can teach the next mother who comes to the palace with a child like this. Make it small enough to remember and important enough to matter when fear makes the mind leave. Kima's eyes widened a little, then softened. She stepped forward, ready to be a student, though she spent her days teaching the palace how to run like a river that does not waste water. I turned to her. Touch here, I said, and I showed her the place at the back of the neck where the skin is thin and the vessels run close, where a gentle, cool cloth can call the heat down without scaring it. Then touch here, I said, and I touched my own chest in the soft place below the throat. Breathe slow. Count your breaths to 10. When you get to 10, see if you have room for another 10. If not, drink and begin again. Tell the mother that her breath is medicine that her child will borrow. It works in the dark when there are no herbs and no fire, Kima nodded. I can remember that, she said. 10 is a number I carry in my hands. Layla took her turn. I will teach you the hum, she said. And she did not sing a fine song. She sang the do, re, mi, do again, slow, then slow again, until it was not a tune, but a line anyone can draw. Sing this not to be heard, she said, but to give your own heart a rope to hold when the night feels like deep water. Kima hummed. The room changed shape a little, as rooms do when a kind sound fills them. The oil lamp flame leaned toward the humming and then stood straight again. We made the room ready for sleep. That is the sentence that covers 100 tender acts. We smoothed the mat, folded a cloth, placed the bowl within reach but not so close it would be kicked, positioned the child so her breath did not have to climb a hill to enter, placed the mother's head on a rolled wrap so her neck would not pinch her thoughts, lowered the lamp's wick until the flame made a soft, round light like the moon on a lake. Queen Mara stood, and the chief advisor stood because she had, and Kima stood because she always carried the horizon. We did not leave the child, but we made the line between night and day. The line there is delicate. It is a kind of border you need to cross with bare feet. We will leave you to the watch, the queen said. I will place 2 guards near, not to shout, not to clatter, just to be there in case you need a runner. She looked at us. You may trade rest between you. Morning will call more choices. After she left, the room felt larger, because her presence carries a lot of space with it, and that space had gone to sleep in another part of the palace. The sounds grew more obvious. A cricket somewhere near, a single drop of water that fell from the edge of the bowl and hit the tray like a bell, the soft stir of someone's foot in the hall. Ida's breathing settled into the same rhythm as her child's, every third breath a tiny sigh. Sleep, I whispered to Layla. I will watch first. She did not argue, which was new between us. She rolled her wrap into a pillow and lay close enough that she could reach Suli's foot with her fingers if she wished. She did not reach. She slept as if she trusted me, which is a way of saying she loved me. I watched. In the night, the room changed again. The oil lamp made the pictures on the wall look like they were moving slowly, as dreams move. A harvest seemed to sway. A river seemed to travel across painted rocks. A woman lifting a child seemed to rise and fall with the lamp flame's quiet breath. Once, Suli lifted her hand in her sleep and touched Ida's chin. Ida laughed in her sleep and then went still again. The sweetness of that small moment was a bowl that filled and did not spill. Sometime past midnight, a cloud must have moved over the moon outside, because the room darkened. Suli woke and coughed, a small dry cough 2 times. I sat forward and placed my hand lightly on her back. We are here, I whispered, not really for her understanding, but for mine. She coughed again and then settled. She swallowed once in her sleep, and I counted her breaths until the counting turned into a kind of steadying prayer. Let what heals stay. Let what harms go. I thought of Grandmother Sifa then, of the night she sat with me when my chest hurt and the world felt too big for my small ribs. She had told me a story of a girl who learned to listen to stones. The stones told her when to step and when to stop, when to cross the stream and when to wait for morning. People think the story is about stones, Grandmother had said when the morning came and I could laugh again without coughing. But it is about listening. In the palace room, I listened for the stones, the sounds, the signs, the small shifts. They told me what I needed to know. We were still moving in the right direction. When my eyes grew heavy, I shook my head like a bird rattling off rain and rose to pour water from the pitcher into the bowl. The sound woke Layla. She sat up, her hair a little wild, her face soft with sleep. "My turn," she whispered. We traded places without ceremony. We did not need to mark the hour with a word. Our bodies knew. I lay down and closed my eyes for the first time, trusting that if anything turned the wrong way, Layla would wake me. She did not need to, but she would have. In her watch, Suli dreamed and made a sound like the first word a baby makes that is not a word anyone taught. A noise of joy. Ida woke and touched her child's cheek, then fell asleep again with a smile. Layla told me later that she counted stars through the window where the night was a square of black in the wall. "They do not change as quickly as people," she whispered. It helped to look at them and feel both tiny and safe. Before dawn, the palace moved again in distance. A door creaked, water moved in the channel, a footfall in the hall, a breath in the room that was not ours. Beside the door, a guard's shadow shifted. He cleared his throat softly, a respectful sound that told us he was still awake. The oil lamp's flame had eaten itself small. Kima came to lift the wick and turned it a little so the flame would last until the day woke the room. She looked at us and smiled, a smile that said, "You are doing it. Keep going." I sat up and felt the weight of things without any heaviness. The air before dawn tastes different. It tastes like a new clean cloth. I stood and stretched my hands and listened to my fingers crack. 1, 2, 3. Not because they were old, but because they had worked all day gently. Softness tires you differently than hard work, but it still tires. We did not speak of the Queen's question from the evening, what we would do with praise, because it felt like a bell that had rung in the air and was still ringing, and words would have chased the echo instead of honoring it. We spoke instead of breakfast porridge for Suli. We spoke of the first spoons, the first rest after. We spoke of what we would watch in her eyes, the way they find light differently when the body wants to live fully again. It is easy to tell you all this inside the safety of knowing how it turned out. But in that hour before the sun came, I did not know. I had hope. I had skill. I had my sister, who had chosen humility over story. I had a mother sleeping in a chair and a child sleeping on a mat. I had the Queen's trust standing like a tall tree in the corner. But still I did not know. I asked softly and without fuss, into the space between my breath and the coming sun, for the day to be mercy. Morning came like dawn always does in a place where people get up early, with birds who cannot help themselves, with the smell of water being poured into pots, with steps in the hall that are soft but more than one. The square of light returned to the ceiling and then slipped onto the floor as if the night had pulled back a blanket. Suli woke. She blinked up at the light and did not flinch. She turned her head to find her mother's face, which was already turned toward her. Mother and child smiled with their eyes first, then their mouths. Queen Mara entered as if she had been waiting at the door for the light's first step. She wore the same simple cloth but different earrings, small circles that caught the light and gave it back gently. "Good morning," she said. "How is our small river?" "Running," I said, and Ida laughed a little, then covered her mouth in the old habit of people who have trained themselves to make their joy small so it will not be taken. The Queen reached out and touched Ida's shoulder. "Make your joy big," she said kindly. "We are inside it with you." The child took water without turning away. The cough came, but it was mild, like the body remembering something it had needed to forget and now letting the memory go safely. The first spoons of porridge went in and did not come back. Ida fed her. We watched like people watching a dance, wanting the step to land and the foot to find the ground without turning. Now, Queen Mara said softly, more to the room than to us, we will listen to another's truth. Ida, mother of Suli, tell me what you saw. I do not ask for praise. I ask for observation. Ida did not jump at the chance to speak. She is not a woman who seeks a spotlight. She is a woman who makes shadows into shelter. She thought first. Then she said, I saw hands that did not push my child's body. I saw hands that moved my fear. I saw that when I breathed slow, my child's breathing listened. I saw Amma change small things that mattered. I saw Layla make me the tool my child needed. If you ask me who is the healer, I will say, my child answered both their hands. It was a beautiful answer and a true one. It did not declare. It described. It made space for the queen to be wise. And you? The queen asked, turning to me. If I now declared in front of all these walls and ears and watching shadows that your hands are the ones from the song, what would you do? I thought of the morning in our courtyard when the first praise had fallen on my sister like beads, of my silence, of the way my silence had made a small bitterness in me like a plant that grows fine but bears bitter fruit. I thought of the choice that had hung in the air in this room when Layla had stepped to speak. I would say thank you, I said softly. I would share with you what I know and not hide it. I would ask your permission to keep working with my sister because our hands do something together that they do not do alone. And you? Queen Mara asked Layla. If I declared for her? I would bring the bright voices that chase me around corners sometimes and set them at her feet, Layla said. I would teach anyone who wants to learn how to sing slow and breathe in small numbers. I would keep my stories honest and my bracelets quiet when they need to be. She paused and smiled a little at that last part, and the room smiled with her. The chief advisor stepped forward then, as if he had been holding an arrow that needed to fly and now saw a safe wall to aim at. My queen, the council, Queen Mara lifted a hand. We have fed a child, she said. We have fed a mother. Now we will feed the truth. Call the court healers. Call the elders who always know better. Call the young ones who think there is nothing left to learn. Let them see a child breathing well. Let them hear what these sisters did and did not do. We will make our decision in the light and in company. I have learned that when I make a quiet decision alone, it is still true, but the wind can blow it away. When I make it with witnesses, the wind has to work harder. Layla looked at me, fear and hope like two birds in her chest beating different wings. Are you ready? She whispered. No, I said, because honesty helps my body find itself, but I can stand, and I have you. The room filled slowly with people whose faces told their stories. An old healer with a scar along his cheek like a river that had once flooded. A young woman with ink on her fingers and a lip bitten raw from thinking too hard. A man with hands so soft you could tell he rarely touched patients now, but still remembered how. A pair of women who looked nothing alike but stood with their shoulders touching like trees that had grown side by side for years. They came with questions and with not a few doubts. Doubt is not an enemy. It is a guardian of the people. It asks for proof so the weak are not harmed by strong stories. Queen Mara told the tale of the day quietly. She did not lift. She did not cut. She named what we had done. She described the cough and how it moved. She told them how the child had lifted her hand in her sleep and touched her mother's chin. She told them how we had fed porridge and made a new day begin. Then she turned to us. Now, she said, teach while the child sleeps. Amma, show them the pulse you listened to first. Layla, show them the hum. Both of you, show them how you gave the mother her medicine before you gave the child anything. We did as she asked. Hands crossed the room to find wrists. Ears leaned into chests. The small hum rolled around the walls and came back warmer. People who always talk fell quiet. People who never talk made a sound. One of the court healers, the old one with the river scar, watched my fingers as I counted in a breath's time the beats that told me not the number a clock would tell, but the number a human would feel. He nodded once, then went still as if something inside him had sat down in a chair and put its feet up. The chief advisor chose that moment to ask the question people always ask when the work has been gentle. "And if the cough had not softened?" he said. "If the fever had climbed? What then, with no herbs and no fire?" "Then we would ask for more tools," I said gently. "We would explain why we asked. We would call for another set of hands. We would not pretend that our simplicity could do all things. Wisdom means knowing when to be plain and when to be bold." Today asked for plain. "If tomorrow asks for bold, we will answer." Layla nodded beside me, and I saw that she felt the truth of it not as a rebuke to her love of brightness, but as a measure of what to do with it. Ida spoke again. "I would have said no," she said, "if I did not trust them. I would have said, 'You are not listening,' if I felt they were going to show how much they knew instead of seeing my child. I say this so you know, they listened. That is what I felt in my spine when I slept and did not fall. Her words did more than ours. When a mother speaks like that, the ground under people's feet changes. The young ones stopped shifting. The old ones stopped looking for a place to rest their doubt. The room drew a breath. Queen Mara nodded to the chief advisor, and he, who had wanted a proclamation the night before, seemed content to wait for one more breath. "We will make our decision when the sun stands higher," she said. "We will see that the child keeps what she has found. We will see that the mother drinks when her child drinks. Then we will speak in a way that carries." We went back to the mat. Suli, as if to remind us that proclamations are not food, coughed and reached for the spoon. Ida laughed and cried at the same time. Layla fed 2 more spoonfuls, and then stopped with a wisdom I might not have trusted in her a month ago. "Enough," she said, and it was not a word that took. It was a word that gave. As the sun climbed, the palace seemed to open its windows wider. Air moved through the hall. The smell of raw wood warmed by sun came in, and the smell of the river's wet stone came in too. Somewhere a child laughed, a high, clear sound that made the day lighter. Somewhere a pot boiled. The court healers left and returned, brought nothing but eyes and ears, not tools. The queen moved among them like a woman gathering leaves of different shapes for a single drink. We were left with a child who would live, and with the task the queen had placed in the air. What is fair? What is true? What restores order in such a way that nobody is made smaller than they are? What do you wish? I asked Layla quietly when the room had emptied a little. If you could name what would feel right, what would be generous and honest, what would you choose? She turned the question the way you turn a fruit to see all sides of it. I wish people to know you, she said. I wish people to trust us together. I wish to lose nothing of what I can give, and to take nothing that is not mine. I wish our mother to be proud without worrying that praise will divide us. I wish the queen to give us tasks that are heavier than a song and lighter than a stone. She smiled a little, embarrassed at the wish's poetry. Is that too much? She asked. It is just enough, I said. We will not name it to the queen as a demand. What we wish will show itself in the way we receive what she decides. We did not have long to wait. Late morning, when the sun sat fat and content in the sky and the courtyard outside had the sound of many pots being stirred, Queen Mara returned. The chief advisor stood behind her with a folded strip of leather in his hand. Kima stood to her right, eyes calm, hands ready to catch anything that needed holding. Ida stood too, because respect rose in her even when the child on the mat was more important to her than any palace. Queen Mara looked at the mat, at the mother, at us, at the open window. Her eyes made another circle, smaller than yesterday's, as if she were drawing the truth closer to a center. The child breathes, she said. The mother stands. The room has learned a new quiet. I have watched long enough. I have heard enough. I will speak now. She paused. The pause was a kind of cloth laid on the table before the food. It made us ready. 2 sisters came, she said. One with hands that listen before they act, one with a voice that steadies others' voices, both with love for the people and for each other, though that love had learned to hide in small corners when praise walked by. They have shown me work that does not need a golden bowl to be important. They have shown me a patient who is one person and also three, a child and a mother and the bond between them. For this palace, for this land, I need both kinds of skill. I need the one who listens to the invisible threads. I need the one who can gather a crowd and teach them how to breathe. She turned to the chief advisor, and he lifted the strip of leather with a small flourish. I saw Layla's throat move as she swallowed. I felt my own knees as if they were made of clay. But first, the queen said, and she lifted a finger, not to stop time, but to ask it to slow. Before I make this formal, I ask you one more thing, Amma and Layla. Speak to each other here, in front of me, as you would speak on the riverbank by yourselves, without a queen. Say the words you have not said at home. If you can do that, then what I say after will be stronger, because it will rest on your words, not just mine. My breath caught. It is one thing to do the work. It is another to lift the heaviest truths and set them down in a room full of ears. But I had asked for justice that made nobody small. Here it was, the kind that asks you to stand with your heart in your hands and trust that the room will be a place where it will not be dropped. I turned to Layla. The memory of years curled up like sleeping dogs along the edges of my mind. Times I had let silence do harm. Times she had let bright words drink from my bowl. I lifted one of those memories carefully and set it down where we both could see. Sister, I said, I have been angry when people praised you for work I did. I left my anger at the bottom of the jar and then found that it flavored everything I poured. That is my fault. I did not speak early when the speaking would have been light and kind. She looked at me, and her eyes shone. Sister, she said, I have wanted people to love me since I first learned how a room can feel when it turns toward you. I have taken what they gave, even when I knew it did not belong only to me. I told myself it was for the work, that the story would bring more people to our courtyard, and often it did. But I did not return enough of the praise to you. I did not say, my sister's hands did this. I did not say, we are two. I liked being one in a story. I forgive you, I said, because we had walked the path to that word. Not because I must, but because I have seen you choose humility in this room, and because I love you. She took my hand and pressed it to her forehead, a gesture we use at home that means I am grateful and I remember. And I forgive you, she said, not for silence alone, for the times you made your quiet heavier than my noise, for the times you believed you had to choose between truth and chose kindness when truth would have fed us both. It is a rare thing to speak like that with witnesses. The room did not break apart. It knit itself around our words like a blanket around a sleeping child. Ida cried and smiled, because that is what a woman does when she sees a wound washed and bound. Kima breathed out as if she had been holding air for others. The chief advisor lowered his eyes, a respectful move people in courts do when private things happen in their presence. And Queen Mara bowed her head slightly, a queen's courtesy for the plain courage in front of her. Now I can speak, Queen Mara said. And her voice had those same threads in it that my grandmother's voice had when she put a hand on my hair at night. Warmth, steadiness, a little joy she could not help. My announcement will carry. Listen. The queen lifted her hand, and the room listened. The strip of leather in the chief advisor's hand looked like a river folded upon itself, waiting to run. The oil lamp's flame stood steady. Dust in the square of light hung like tiny boats at anchor. My announcement will carry, Queen Mara said. Listen. She looked at Suli, sleeping with her head turned toward her mother's hand. She looked at Ada, who stood stronger now than she had in the morning. She looked at Layla and then at me. Her eyes were soft and clear, like water that shows the stones at the bottom. In this palace and in every village that hears our word, she said, I name Amma and Layla as healers of the Queen's house. Your work is one. Your gifts are two. Together they make a whole. Amma listens with her hands before she moves. Layla steadies breath and gathers hearts. From this day, in palace rooms and in market squares, the two of you will teach healers, mothers, fathers, and anyone who will learn what you have shown today, that a child's body listens to kindness, that a mother's breath is medicine, that simple tools used with patience Can carry us through the night. She turned to the chief advisor. Right, she said. He unrolled the leather. His reed pen pressed soundless words into it while the room held itself still. I felt the lines of our lives being pressed along with the letters. The queen continued, We will make a quiet room in this palace. It will be near the water and away from shouting. Mothers will be welcomed first. Ida, if you wish, you may come one day each month when the market brings you near. You may sit with Kima and teach the hum and the hands. Your wisdom today was part of the cure. We honor it. Ida's hand flew to her chest. My queen, she said, and tears ran before the rest could. Kima, Queen Mara went on, you will keep 10 as a tool in your pocket, the way you keep keys. You will count for those whose minds leave. You will teach them to count for themselves when their minds return. Kima nodded. A deep bow from the neck, and I saw her fingers make a small circle, as if holding the number like a coin. As for the story that traveled here, the queen said, turning toward Layla with a gaze that did not shrink or expand, we will set it right not by cutting it down, but by adding what it lacks. We will ask the singers to bring a new verse. We will ask the message runners to say both names. We will not erase, we will expand. We will make the truth large enough to fit the whole. She faced me then. Amma, she said, I ask you to lead a circle for hands. Show the healers of the court and the towns how to listen before they act, how to measure without making fear. Bring your book tied with twine. Teach them to write the small things they see so that other eyes can read them later. My fingers found the twine in my pocket as if called. I felt the old comfort there and nodded. Yes, my queen, I said. My voice did not rise. It settled. And Layla, the queen said, I ask you to lead a circle for voices. Teach the hum and the short words that fit in the mouth when the heart is too full to speak. Teach how to stand where others will see you, and then point their eyes where they need to look, toward the child, toward the breath, toward the simple tools that are always near. Your light will make room for others to see. Layla did not glow. She opened. Yes, my queen, she answered. Her voice held a thread of our grandmother's wisdom, and a thread of her own careful joy. Queen Mara lifted both hands. One more thing, she said. In this house we have had healers who worked well with herbs and with knife. We honor them. Today we add a law. In any illness that touches a child, the mother's presence is part of the care. No healer will push a mother away. No healer will use show to stand in the mother's place. We learned it in a small room today. We will make it larger. A quiet murmur moved along the wall where the court healers stood. Some faces softened. One old healer with a long scar along his cheek dipped his head deeply in respect. A young one pressed her lips together and nodded with relief, as if this had been the rule in her heart and now it could live outside her. The chief advisor lifted the leather, read what he had written, and then bowed. His eyes had lost their hurry. The slow ink had done its work. Queen Mara's gaze came back to us. Now we seal this the way my mother taught me to seal a promise that must last through seasons, she said. Not with a shout. With a vow. Repeat after me. My hands will listen before they act. My words will serve the truth. My praise will work, not sit. My silence will not hide what should be seen. Where there is fear, I will lend steadiness. Where there is pride, I will lend humility. Where there is confusion, I will lend patience. I will remember that truth is not a knife. It is a seed. We repeated each line slowly. I tasted each word the way you taste a fruit for ripeness. Layla's voice braided with mine. Etta whispered along as if the vow fit her too. Kima whispered. Even the guard outside the door cleared his throat as if swallowing a small part of it. When we finished, Queen Mara smiled, not a queen's smile only, but a woman's smile who had carried a sleeping child before dawn and felt the weight change to a softer weight when that child rested well again. Good, she said. Now we will let the child sleep. We will feed the mother. At midday, if the child still holds her strength, we will take her to the courtyard to feel the light. Then you will go home with letters and with a cart of supplies to help you teach. Your grandmother's stool was wise to hold steady where she left it. Now it will hold more. For a while, we did not move. The room felt like the inside of a gourd where water rests cool. Suli slept without the small furrow. Ida ate the porridge Kima brought her and drank water she needed but had not remembered to ask for. Layla and I sat side by side. Our shoulders touched. It startled me, that simple touch, because we had not sat like that since we were very young, when a lap was still big enough for two. The old healer with the scar came forward when the room had loosened. He knelt in a way that made his bones creak. "Amma," he said. "In my youth I thought speed was skill. Your hands showed me that patience has its own swiftness. Forgive an old man's pride," I shook my head. "There is nothing to forgive," I said. "You have carried people across hard nights for years." He smiled with his eyes, which made his scar look like a river in sun. "Then accept my thanks," he said. He turned to Layla. "And you, teach my students the hum. They will be shy. Most young ones are. Let them sing in the kitchen first. They will bring it to the bedside when they trust it." Layla laughed softly. "The kitchen is the first theater for every good lesson," she said. "I will meet them there." Near midday, when the light in the room grew tender, we lifted Suli and carried her to the courtyard. The air outside had that fresh smell that comes after stone has been in shade and then meets the sun again. Birds flew along the wall and curved away. The water in the channel ran with a little joy in its own voice. Suli squinted and then smiled. She reached both hands to the light and made a little grabbing motion, the way children do when they want to hold what cannot be held. Ida laughed and pressed her cheek to her child's hair. "Thank you," she whispered to us, to the queen, to the water, to the sky. Gratitude does not always know which direction to take. It chooses all paths. We said our goodbyes in the language of our land, not with long speeches, but with touches and looks. The queen pressed both my hands between hers. "Teach," she said. To Layla, she said, "Gather." To Kima, she said, "Hold." To Ida, she said, "Rest when you can." To Suli, she said, "Grow." We left the palace with the chief advisor's letter rolled and tied with a thin strip of cloth. The cart was the same one that had brought us, but it carried new bundles, clean cloths, simple bowls, spare spoons, extra oil, and 2 more pitchers. A small bell lay wrapped in soft cloth. Kima had set it there. "Ring this if you are in trouble on the road," she had said. Not to call attention, to call help. She had taught us the small way to ring it, so it would carry to ears that know. We rode out through the gate as the guards lifted their spears and dropped them again in a smooth salute. The sun sat high but not cruel. The road home faced us like a path we had walked in a dream and now would walk awake. The donkey flicked his ears, content. Layla sat beside me. The leather letter lay between us. It felt cool even in the heat. We did not talk for a while. The wheels made that pleasant wooden sound that has carried families for centuries. The smell of dust rose and fell. A boy ran alongside the cart for a few breaths and then turned back to the field. A woman with a basket on her head nodded and smiled the kind of smile you give to someone who has done a good chore and will surely do another. At the first bend, we saw the very old tree that had shaded us on our way to the palace. The old woman selling roasted plantains sat there again. When she saw us, she waved her cloth and called, "Ah!" "The slow ink has dried?" We laughed and stopped the cart. "It has," Layla said. The old woman reached into her basket and pressed 2 plantains into our hands. Their skins were nearly black from the fire, but the flesh would be sweet. "Your grandmother would be pleased," she said to me. I always liked her ways. Her prayer tasted like work. Then she leaned toward Layla. "And your voice, keep it warm and low. Voices can heal or harm. Yours will heal if you remember the soft edge." "I will remember," Layla said. We ate the plantain as we rolled away, the taste smoky, sweet and soft. The flavor carried the road and the old woman's praise and a kitchen memory from when our mother used to put a plate in front of us and say, "Eat, then go help your grandmother pound leaves." I felt full in a way that had nothing to do with food. As our village came into view, I saw the line of the baobab against the sky. It stood like a guardian who had waited and would keep waiting. Dust rose in our courtyard as people moved toward our gate. Children ran, small arms pumping, feet bare, hair shining like crow wings. Abina, whose ankle we had wrapped, stood at the edge of the crowd. She leaned more weight on that foot than she had in the morning we had left. She raised both hands to greet us. The gesture made my eyes sting. Our mother reached us first. Her wrap was tied tight, her hair scarf neat. She did not cry until she had a hand on each of our cheeks. Then the tears came and she laughed at them. "Ah," she said, "you see how water follows heat?" My fear boiled, and then your letter cooled it. She pulled us both in. I smelled smoke and starch and the faint sweetness that always clings to her clothes from drying them near the mango tree. We shared the news under the baobab, where everyone could hear. Not with me standing on a stool, not with Layla singing a large song, but with the chief advisor's letter unrolled and read in a plain voice that carried because everyone wanted to listen. Mother held the leather. Her hands, used to making dough and wringing cloth and steadying a child, did not tremble. Her voice was not loud, but she had the kind of presence that makes silence feel chosen, not forced. "The Queen names Amma and Layla as healers of the Queen's house," she read. "They will teach hands and voices. They will share what they know. The story is changed to hold both names. A quiet room will be made. Mothers are part of the care. This is the law." When she finished, there was a moment the wind could have walked through the circle. Then the sound came. A soft, steady sound of hands coming together. No one shouted. People looked at us with the kind of pride that does not put you on a high shelf. It puts you at a table and says, "Sit, eat, then show us where to put our hands." After we had eaten and washed, after our mother had pressed clothes into our arms and then pulled us back and pressed her face to our foreheads again, Layla and I went to the stool that had waited by the door since the rain season when our grandmother left it. The 2 smooth marks from her heels were the same. I touched them with my fingers. "I thought they would fade," I said. "They did not." "They will one day," Layla said softly. "And then we will carry the feel of them in our hands." "Do you miss her today?" I asked. "Yes," she said, "and also no. She is in your work. She is in my hum. She is in that little girl's sigh when she slept with ease. She is in the Queen's law." We sat on the ground and leaned our backs against the wall the way we had when the messenger had first come. We told our mother more, in the long style of family talk that fills in the little holes a formal message leaves. We told her about the oil lamp and the square of light on the floor. We told her about Kima's hum. We told her about the guard who cleared his throat at the vow. We told her about the old healer's respect. Our mother listened without interruption, then said only, "Good. Do not forget to fetch water in the morning. Clothes will be dirty whether a queen knows your name or not." We laughed. The laughter settled the day into the shelves of ordinary life where it belongs. The next day, we began our new work in the place where we were known. We set a time under the baobab that we would call the quiet hour. We chose late afternoon, when the sun still warmed but had lost its sharpness. We asked mothers and fathers to come, not with coins, but with attention. We asked the old healers to come and lead us when they wished. We asked the young to come and use their strong backs to carry water and their nimble fingers to wrap cloths. We asked the ones who liked to sing to hum low and slow. We asked the ones who liked to talk afterward, not during. On the first day, only a few came. Abina limped in with her ankle wrapped by our cloth, her boy on her back again. Kojo came with his father, who had a soft cough that made his eyes water but did not steal his breath. A teenage girl with a baby sister sat at the back and watched with a brave face. We touched necks. We counted to 10. We hummed. We let mothers' hands rest on little backs and little bellies. We did not give long speeches. We asked questions and waited for answers. We told small stories. We told them how the Queen had lifted a curtain to bend the light. On the second day, more came. A woman brought her brother who slept too much. A man brought his wife who had not laughed for a month. Layla drew them into a circle where nothing needed to be perfect. She taught the hum like a rope, and the highest voices did not always find the first note, and it did not matter. I taught the cloth to the neck and the back, and hands trembled at first and then steadied. Our mother stood among them, holding a bowl, as she always had, making the work feel like home. We wrote as we had promised. In the small book tied with twine, I drew lines. Nothing grand, just notes. Cough eased when Mother hummed. Water with spoon better than cup. Shiver answered to cloth under back, not on the head. Layla wrote too. Girl laughed when she sang the number 10. Man stopped shaking when he counted to 5 twice. The book thickened with our slow ink. One morning, a man came from a village near the bigger road. He carried a small bundle and big words. He had heard of us at the market and came with praise ready in his mouth. He walked straight to Layla. "Ah, you are the miracle," he said, and lifted his hands. Layla took one step aside so that I stood in the same line as she did. She smiled. "We work together," she said. Amma listens with her hands. I help people breathe. "Sit with us. You will see." Her voice did not scold. It placed the words where they needed to be, like bowls on a table. The man sat. He watched. After the quiet hour, he came to both of us. He held his praise differently. It fit. Sometimes we traveled back to the palace. The road became familiar the way a path becomes yours when you walk it often, and leave some of your worries along it, like seeds that cannot grow in stone. In the palace, the quiet room filled with a calm that one could almost taste. A child would be carried in, hot and frightened, and leave warm and steady. Mothers learned the hum even when they spoke another language for their shopping and their farming. We met court healers in the kitchen and taught them to sing over the pot before they sang by the bed. We watched the law take root. No one pushed a mother out of a room. On one visit, the queen's daughter, a tall girl with eyes like her mother's, came to us with a basket of flowers she had picked herself. "For the quiet room," she said. "Flowers do not heal, but they help the room remember that life is beautiful even when someone coughs." Layla laughed softly. "You are a good teacher already," she said. The girl smiled and went away with the lightness of someone whose back has not yet carried a day of worry but will, and knows the house has a room ready for it when it comes. Kima kept 10 in her pocket as if it really were a coin. I watched her breathe with a young mother who had not slept in 2 days. I watched her count and count again, and how the counting made the mother's eyes soften. 10 is kind, Kima told me later in the kitchen while she washed bowls. It does not make a show. It arrives, stays, and leaves, and then invites itself again if needed. At home, the village changed in small, true ways. The story on festival nights made room for new lines. When Layla sang, she sang with less flair and more heart. She did not lift her hands as if the sky belonged to her. She lifted them to show people where to look, at the cloth, at the breath, at the hands they already had. When I told a story, I told it with more courage. I said my hands did this when that was the truth. I said we did this when that was. I said the mother did this when a mother's courage had led the work. People did not turn away from the small truths. They leaned closer. We made a little shelf in our courtyard where we placed Grandmother Sifa's stool. We did not climb on it. We set things on it that reminded us to be plain. A simple cloth, a wooden spoon with a smooth handle, a small stone from the river. When the sun moved across it, it made a square of light on the ground the way the palace window had. Sometimes we worked inside that square and felt the palace in our yard. Sometimes we worked in shadow and felt our grandmother's hand in the shade. Did jealousy ever return? It is fair to ask. People are rivers and storms and fields. We do not become saints by a single vow. There were days when someone praised my sister with too much noise. There were days when someone praised me and forgot her. There were days when my own chest tightened with the old habit, when I wanted to say, "Look at me," and chose instead to keep my voice steady and place the truth where it belonged. On those days, we used the small sign we had decided upon on the card under the stars. We would say the word twine, and it meant, remember the book, remember the vow, remember to tie your words to the truth. We would breathe and start again. Once, in the market, a young man tried to set a platform for Layla to stand on and speak. He had made a little frame and decorated it with fabric strips to make the sun catch it. "You must stand where they can see," he said. Layla smiled and took his hand. "Come," she said and led him to the shade. I can stand on the ground. If you make a platform, make it strong enough for 2 hearts and a mother's chair. Make it low. Make it so a child can reach it without a ladder. The young man looked at his frame and laughed at his own grand plan. He took it apart and used the wood to make a simple bench instead. People sat. They learned. The lesson walked home with them because their feet could reach the ground. One rain season, the river rose high. It spoke loud at night. The baobab shed a limb, not from weakness, but to send its strength where it was needed. In that season, more people came with fever. We did what we could with cloth and water and hum. We asked for more when we needed more. We sent for herbs when the fever would not listen. We sent for the court healer with the scar when a child's chest made a sound that said, "This is the time for bitter and bold." He came. He worked beside us. He did not push the mother. He counted to 10 while the potion cooled. He balanced our plane with his needed power. After we recorded it all. Balance, I wrote in the book. We did not cling to simple out of pride. As the seasons turned, our work became ordinary and also precious. Ordinary like bread, like going to fetch water, like tying a scarf. Precious like a lamp that burns through a night when you are afraid. The queen sent word sometimes, a folded leather carried by a quick-footed runner. The quiet room was full and peaceful today, read one. A mother new to the city found her way without fear, read another. I carried my daughter again, read a third. And I smiled to think of the queen's strong arms and the weight of a child who will always be her child, even when she grows tall. Once, Queen Mara came herself without ceremony. She arrived with a small cloth wrapped around a small object and with only 2 guards who stayed at the road and watched the goats so they would not wander into the garden. She stepped into our courtyard as if stepping into a promised cool place after a hot walk. We invited her to sit on our grandmother's stool. She stood before it, then looked at us and asked, "May I?" "You may," we said together. A queen who asks to sit has already done something right. She unwrapped the small cloth and set a carved wooden sign on the stool. The sign was simple. It showed 2 hands, palms open, with a small circle between them. Underneath, carved in the old style, were words. Hands first listen. She traced the circle. This is the breath, she said. This is the mother. This is the space between truth and kindness where wisdom lives. We placed the sign where the sun would touch it every day. It warmed, it taught without sound. We walked with the queen to the baobab. People gathered from their yards, standing at a respectful distance because they knew how to be close without crowding. Children pointed. A boy whispered, "Her earrings are small." His mother shushed him, but the queen heard and laughed. "Small things carry," she said out loud, and the boy grinned. Under the tree, Queen Mara spoke a few words. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. I came to see with my own eyes the place where 2 sisters make many hands steady, she said. I came to stand where their grandmother stood and where their mother stands. I came to say to all of you, when you speak of healing, say both names. When you see someone work, say their name. We are not here to turn one into a shadow and one into a sun. We are here to build a roof that keeps rain off many heads. The old drummer lifted his drum and tapped once, then once more. Then he stopped, because that was enough. That evening, when the queen had gone and the courtyard returned to its soft hush, Layla brought her wrap and sat beside me on the ground. We had done the small chores. We had folded the cloths and set them in order. We had written the day's notes. We had counted the spoons. We had rolled the oil jar in cloth. The air cooled on our cheeks. A moth bumped the lamp's shade and then found the night again. What was the hardest part for you? Layla asked. In the palace, I said. The moment before you spoke the truth. I held my breath then. I thought, if she takes it, our next steps will be good. If she does not, our steps will be rocks. What was the hardest part for you? I asked her, she thought. Liking the sound of my own name and still saying yours, she said. I do like praise. I will not pretend I do not, but I have learned that it tastes better when I share it. It stays in the body longer. It feeds more. I smiled. We have learned to make praise into food, not drink, I said. Food steadies. Drink flashes and goes. She leaned her shoulder against mine. "Will you remind me of this when the drum is loud?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "And you will remind me to speak when my quiet makes a shadow." We sat like that, shoulder to shoulder, and watched the stars as if they were small lamps hung high by someone who knows. You will wake in the night and need to find your way to the door. The river spoke its old language at the edge of our hearing. The baobab breathed out the day and breathed in the night. In the weeks that followed, we added small things to our practice. We hung a piece of cloth at the entrance of the courtyard. People knew that when the cloth hung straight, the quiet hour had begun, and voices should bring themselves small. We gathered a basket of smooth river stones for children to hold, one in each hand, when they felt their bodies filled with fright. Holding gives a child's hands a job. Work calms fear. We taught it to the older ones too. A man who had lived through a hard season came and held 2 stones and spoke for the first time in months. He said 5 words. "I slept," he said, "and did not drown." We counted that as a cure of a kind. We made a place in our book for names. Not names of patients, that was private, but names of those who helped. "Kojo carried water," we wrote. Abina hummed when she still hurt. Ruth held her brother's hand and made him count. We wanted the book to show, to anyone who read it later, that healing is a village, not a person. Sometimes when the market was busy and the songs were many, a new visitor would reach for Layla's bracelets and say, "You must be the healer." Layla would lift the person's hand gently and turn it so their palm faced up. "You are holding your own healer," she would say. "Look, we will teach your hand what to do. Amma will show you where to place it." The visitor's face would change. The way faces change when people realize they are not empty after all. On the first anniversary of the day the messenger came to our gate, we held a circle under the baobab and told the story again, slowly, the way one counts to 10. Our mother sat with us. Ida came with Suli, taller now, quick and full of questions. The old healer with the scar came and sat in the back, and his eyes shone as if a river ran behind them. Kima walked into the circle just as we began. We had not expected her. Her braid had more silver in it. She stood between us like a bridge between 2 banks that had learned to see they were part of the same river. Queen Mara did not come that day, but she sent a new letter. "I carried my daughter again," it read, "and my back sang a song. It was a soft song." I breathed slow. I counted to 10. It passed. "Your sign hangs in the quiet room. It warms in the sun." We told the story without lifting any part too high. We told how the messenger's horse had dipped his head as if to listen. We told how the square of light had moved across the floor. We told how the cough had changed its mind and left. We told how the queen had made a rule that left nobody outside the door. We told the vow. We spoke it together again. The village spoke it with us. We did not shout. We spoke quietly and let the words land. After, children ran with sticks at the edge of the field. A group of girls made a circle and hummed softly while one of them pretended to be a baby and another pretended to be a mother. They had watched and were practicing the world they would inherit. Boys took the stones and held them in their hands, and at first they made a game of throwing them, and then one boy stopped the others and said, "No, these are for holding," and they held them and talked about what fear feels like, and I thought, this is the work. That night, when the house was quiet, Layla and I brought out the small carved sign the queen had given us and placed it near the stool. The words caught the lamp's glow. Hands first listen. We did not need the reminder that night, but we would need it again. We set it there for the days when speed would tempt us, for the days when praise would feel too sweet, for the days when silence would grow a little belly and ask to be fed. We promised each other, with no one to witness but the moth and the stars, to lift the sign off the stool and hold it between us when we felt that old pull. In the second year, a new healer from a far village came to sit with us. She was young and had a sharp gaze. She listened well. She learned the hum. She learned to watch the small signs. She learned to ask the mother first. On her last day, she stood and said, "I came because I heard a big story about miracles. I am leaving with small tools. I think the small tools will last longer." She smiled at me, then at Layla. and then at our mother and at the stool and at the sign and at the baobab. She took the road with a small bell in her bag, a bowl wrapped in cloth, a spoon, and the number 10 tucked behind her ear. Was justice done? You might ask me now at the end of this telling. Justice arrived like the morning light comes through a high window. It fell on the mat, on the mother's shoulders, on the hands that had worked in shadow and in bright. It did not blame. It did not punish. It did not ask anyone to kneel in shame. It asked us to stand and to speak. It asked us to vow and then to live the vow. It gave back what had been misplaced. It placed more in our hands, not as a prize, but as a duty. When I think of that day in the palace now, I do not first see the queen standing with the letter. I see the small square of sun on the floor. I see Suli's eyelashes opening and closing. I hear the hum that was almost nothing and was everything. I feel my sister's shoulder against mine. I hear my grandmother's voice saying, "Presence is a medicine," and I hear my own voice saying, "And patience is the spoon that gives it." I taste porridge. I smell oil warmed by hands. The river outside the palace runs in my ear. The river in our village answers. We grew older, as all people do who are allowed the grace. Our hands kept their steadiness. Our voices kept their soft edge. The stool's heel marks wore thinner, and then, one day, when the rain came hard and the air smelled like fresh clay, they were gone. We did not cry. We pressed our fingers where the marks had been and felt nothing but smoothness and, in it, everything. The stool had given its memory to our palms. On the last day of one dry season, when the harmattan had laid its fine veil over the world and the sky was the color of groundnut, a mother we had taught in our first year came with a basket of mangoes. She set it down and said, "My child was sick last month. I forgot what to do. Then I remembered your counting. I remembered the hum. I did not panic. We came through the night. So I bring you these. They are sweet. They grew from a seed we put in the ground years ago. We took the mangoes, and when we opened one, the scent was so thick and joyful that we laughed like children. We ate slices standing in the yard, juice running down our wrists. Our mother scolded us gently for being messy and then licked her own wrist and laughed. Layla wiped her laugh with the back of her hand and said, "Do you remember the first time the court praised me?" I nodded. "I have a different praise now," she said. "It is the way a mother looks at her child when the fever breaks." "No drum can beat that, and you?" I asked, because I wanted to hear my own answer too. "I have a different credit now," I said. "It is the record in our book, written not with big words but with small ones. It is seeing my sister say my name when it should be said. It is hearing my own voice speak when it should, and be quiet when it should. It is watching hands that are not mine do what mine have taught. That is the credit I trust to last." In the cool of that evening, we sat under the baobab, and Layla sang a simple tune while I told a simple story. The story went like this. A queen heard 2 names and a crowd's song. She asked for 1 test and 1 patient. She watched a child breathe. She watched a mother sleep. She saw 2 sisters share a vow. Then she made a room. Then she gave a law. Then she sent us home with cloth and a bowl. Then she sent us work, not just praise. When I finished, Layla's last note floated into the branches and then fell back like a leaf. People did not clap loudly. They smiled as if remembering something they already knew. They stood in no hurry. They took the road to their houses. The baobab's trunk held the day's heat a little longer and then let it go. I touched the sign that sat on grandmother's stool. Hands first listen. The carved circle in the middle held the lamp's light. Layla brushed my shoulder with her fingers. The river spoke. The stars took their places. Somewhere a child turned in sleep and put a small hand to a mother's face. Somewhere a queen carried her daughter from a bench to a mat and then stood in the doorway and counted to 10. Somewhere an old healer put his hand on the wall as he walked and felt his scar pull and smiled at the memory of our small hands teaching his big one to be soft again. Truth did its work. It did not cut, it grew. Justice walked in, not with soldiers, but with breath and water and a spoon. And when I lay down and put my hand under my cheek, I felt my own pulse like a bird's wing, beating. I pressed my fingers to it and listened. Then I slept, because in the morning there would be work. And that is the kind of praise I love best. A day that calls you into it with a task that fits your hands.